The monastery of St. Clement clung to the mountainside like a stoic sentinel, its weathered stone walls bearing witness to 2 centuries of prayer and contemplation. Within its eastern transept, behind an unassuming oak door secured by 3 iron locks, lay the chamber that haunted Brother Oswin Kerrick's dreams. Oswin knelt on the cold flagstones, his woolen habit offering little protection against the pre-dawn chill that seeped from the ancient floor. At 26, he was the youngest keeper of the Order's most sacred trust, a responsibility that had hollowed his cheeks and dimmed the light in his grey eyes. He had been chosen for his unfaltering devotion, his perfect memory, and his utter dedication to duty above all earthly desires. "Memento mori," he whispered, lighting the first of 7 black candles arranged in a precise pattern. The flame caught, illuminating the worn leather of the manuscript before him. "Remember, you must die." Through the narrow window high above, the first fingers of dawn reached into the chamber, touching the ornate reliquary that contained the Order's most guarded secret. Oswin knew what lay within, not through sight, for no keeper was permitted to open the silver chest, but through the ancient texts he had spent a decade studying. The knowledge of the forgotten order, they called it. The wisdom that must never die, yet never fully live. Oswin had surrendered his youth to its service, believing that no higher calling existed than preserving these sacred mysteries. "Brother Oswin?" The voice startled him from his morning ritual. "The abbot requires your presence." Brother Thomas stood in the doorway, averting his eyes from the sacred texts as custom demanded. At 60, the old monk's hands trembled slightly, a reminder that time claimed even those who had renounced worldly attachment. "I will come directly," Oswin replied, carefully covering the manuscript with a cloth of undyed linen. As he followed Brother Thomas through the silent corridors, Oswin composed himself. The abbot rarely summoned the keepers unless a matter of grave importance had arisen. The monastery functioned precisely because each brother knew his place and kept to it without deviation. The abbot's chamber was austere, as befitted a man who had taken vows of poverty, but the quality of his writing table and the stained glass in the single window spoke of the monastery's significance. Beside him stood a woman whose presence in these cloistered halls was itself a breach of hallowed tradition. She was tall and slender, with a bearing that spoke of noble birth despite her simple traveling clothes. When she turned, Oswin was struck by the intensity in her deep brown eyes. "Brother Oswin," the abbot said, his tone carefully measured. "This is Lady Sybilla Grantham." Her father, Lord Grantham, was the monastery's most generous benefactor before his passing. Oswin bowed slightly. "My lady, may the Lord grant your father eternal peace." "Brother Oswin," the abbot continued, "Lady Grantham has come with a royal decree. She is to be granted access to certain texts within our library." A cold dread settled in Oswin's stomach. "Which texts, Father Abbot?" The abbot's eyes flickered with discomfort. "Those pertaining to the Enigmatic Ritual." Oswin felt the blood drain from his face. For 8 generations, the knowledge had remained sealed within St. Clement's walls, protected by men who had forsaken all worldly attachments to serve as its guardians. "Forgive me, Father Abbot, but that is impossible," Oswin said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The oath I took, the oath serves the Church," the abbot interrupted, "and the Church serves God's will. Lady Grantham carries the seal of Cardinal Beaufort himself." Sybilla Grantham stepped forward, her movements deliberate and graceful. "I understand your reluctance, Brother Oswin. The texts I seek contain knowledge that belonged to my family before it was surrendered to the Church for safekeeping. I do not come to expose your secrets to the world, but to recover something that was lost. The knowledge is not meant to be possessed by any single family or person," Oswin replied, struggling to maintain his composure. "It is a burden we carry so others need not." "And yet," she said, her voice gentle but unyielding, "here I stand with permission to access what you protect. Will you defy both the cardinal and your abbot?" Oswin looked to the abbot, hoping to find support, but the old man's gaze had dropped to the floor. The decision had been made before Oswin entered the room. "You will assist Lady Grantham in her research," the abbot said, making it clear this was not a request. "You will provide the texts she requires and answer her questions truthfully. This is the will of those who guide our order." The world Oswin had built his life upon began to crumble. Duty had always been his North Star, duty to God, to the order, to the sacred trust. Now that same duty commanded him to break his most solemn vow. "As you wish, Father Abbot," he said, though the words tasted like ashes on his tongue. The archive beneath the monastery's east wing was accessible only through a narrow staircase hidden behind a false wall in the chapter house. As Oswin led Lady Grantham down the worn stone steps, the air grew damp and thick with the scent of aged parchment and protective oils. "Few living souls have seen these chambers," he said, lighting a series of wall sconces that cast long shadows across the vaulted ceiling. "The brothers who tend these archives rarely speak, even among themselves. It is believed that silence preserves the sanctity of what we guard." Sybilla's eyes widened as they entered the first chamber. Oak shelves lined the walls, each holding leather-bound volumes arranged by an organizational system comprehensible only to the initiated. In the center stood a large table where manuscripts could be examined without risking damage from handling. "This is but the antechamber," Oswin explained. "The texts you seek are kept elsewhere." "How many rooms lie beneath the monastery?" she asked, her voice hushed. 7 chambers, each more protected than the last. The 7th has not been opened in my lifetime. For 3 days, Oswin guided Sybilla through the archives, retrieving texts that had not seen daylight in decades. He watched as she pored over manuscripts written in languages few scholars could still decipher, her fingers tracing illuminations with a reverence that surprised him. On the 4th day, as they worked by lamplight in the 3rd chamber, Oswin's curiosity finally overcame his reticence. "Why do you seek this knowledge, my lady? What does the enigmatic ritual mean to you?" Sybilla looked up, her face half in shadow. "My father spent his final years searching for these texts. On his deathbed, he made me swear to continue his quest." "But why?" "The ritual has not been performed in 300 years. Many believe it never should have been performed at all." She was silent for a long moment. "My ancestor, Richard Grantham, was among the 7 who developed the ritual. Before he died, he hid something of great importance, something that could only be found by one who understood the ritual's true meaning." Oswin felt a shiver run down his spine. "The ritual was developed to communicate with the dead, my lady. The Church deemed it dangerous to the soul." "Is that what your order teaches?" Her eyes held his. "That it was mere necromancy." "It is what the texts themselves reveal," he replied, though a doubt had begun to form in his mind. "Then why protect the knowledge rather than destroy it?" The question struck at the heart of the contradiction Oswin had never allowed himself to examine. "Why indeed?" "Some knowledge, once created, cannot be unmade," he said carefully. "To destroy it would be to admit it holds power. By guarding it, we ensure it remains dormant." "Or perhaps," Sybilla suggested, "your order preserves it because the Church knows the ritual was never about speaking with the dead at all." That night, Oswin could not sleep. He knelt in his small cell, praying for guidance, but his thoughts kept returning to Lady Grantham's words. The ritual's true purpose, could the teachings passed down through generations of keepers be incomplete? Had he dedicated his life to protecting a half-truth? When dawn broke, he found himself standing before the door to the chamber he had shown to no one, not even the abbot himself. The 4th chamber, where the most controversial texts were kept. Lady Grantham was waiting in the archive antechamber when he arrived, her eyes brightening at the sight of the ancient key in his hand. "You've reconsidered," she said. "It wasn't a question." "I have questions that require answers," Oswin replied. "Answers I believe we may find together." The fourth chamber was smaller than the others, its walls lined not with shelves but with stone niches, each containing a single document case sealed with wax bearing the sigil of the Forgotten Order, a key crossed with a quill. "These are the original accounts," Oswin explained, his voice barely above a whisper. "Written by the 7 founders of the ritual themselves." Sybilla's breath caught. "Including Richard Grantham's account?" Oswin nodded, approaching a niche near the center of the room. "The 6th case. I've never opened any of them, but I know their arrangement." With trembling hands, he removed the case and placed it on the small reading table in the center of the chamber. The wax seal cracked as he opened it, releasing a scent of aged parchment and something else, a faint aroma of roses and cedar. Inside lay a bound journal, its cover made of leather so dark it appeared almost black in the lamplight. A silver clasp, fashioned in the shape of a key, held it closed. "This is it," Sybilla whispered, her fingers hovering above the journal without touching it. "My father described it exactly thus." "There is no lock for the key," Oswin observed, studying the clasp. "The key is not meant to open the journal," Sybilla replied. "It represents what lies within." As the days passed, Oswin found himself drawn deeper into Lady Grantham's quest. Together they studied Richard Grantham's journal, along with the accounts of the other 6 founders. What they discovered shattered everything Oswin had been taught. The enigmatic ritual had never been designed to communicate with the dead. It was a complex cipher, a method of preserving and transmitting knowledge that the Church of the time had deemed dangerous, not because it was heretical, but because it transferred power from the religious authorities to those who mastered the cipher. "Your order has been protecting a key to knowledge, Brother Oswin," Sybilla explained as they pieced together the fragments of understanding. "The ritual is a means of encoding information so that only those who know the process can retrieve it." "But what knowledge could be so dangerous that 7 learned men would create such an elaborate deception to preserve it?" Oswin asked. Sybilla's eyes met his. "The location of the Library of Alexandria." The words hung in the air between them like a physical presence. "The library was destroyed," Oswin said. "Everyone knows this. What if it wasn't? What if the most valuable texts were saved and hidden? My ancestors' journal suggests the 7 founders discovered the secret location and feared the knowledge would be lost forever if the church or crown discovered it." Oswin felt lightheaded. If true, this would rewrite history itself. "But why reveal this now? Why did your father wait until his death to set you on this path?" Sybilla's expression darkened. "Because there are others searching. My father believed someone within the church hierarchy seeks the library not to preserve it, but to control or destroy it." "The Cardinal," Oswin whispered, remembering the seal that had granted Sybilla access. "He doesn't know what you're truly seeking." She shook her head. "I used my family's influence to obtain his permission, but I told him only that I sought texts related to my ancestral lands." The realization of what they had stumbled upon, and the danger it presented, settled over Oswin like a shroud. His duty to the Order had always been clear: protect the knowledge from the world. But now he understood that the knowledge itself was merely a key to something far greater. "If what you say is true," he said slowly, "then my Order's purpose has been to guard this secret until the time was right for the knowledge to be reclaimed." "Yes," Sybilla replied. "And I believe that time is now." The 6th chamber of the archives could only be accessed through a narrow passageway that required Oswin to stoop. Lady Grantham followed close behind, her breath warm against his neck in the confined space. After 2 weeks in her company, he had become acutely aware of her presence, not merely as a disruption to his ordered existence, but as a person whose mind challenged and engaged his own. "The ritual instructions should be here," he said as they emerged into a circular room with a domed ceiling. "If your theory is correct, they will contain the cipher needed to decode the location." The chamber was bare except for a stone altar in the center, upon which rested a single book bound in red leather. Around the altar, 7 alcoves had been carved into the walls, each containing a small statue representing one of the 7 virtues. "This is unlike the other chambers," Sybilla observed, her eyes taking in the unusual arrangement. "This room was designed for the ritual itself," Oswin explained, approaching the altar. "The 7 virtues watch over the proceedings: prudence, justice, temperance, courage, faith, hope, and love." He reached for the red book, then hesitated, his hand hovering above it. "Once I open this, there will be no turning back. The knowledge it contains has been protected for centuries. To use it for any purpose is to change the course set by those who came before us." Sybilla stood on the opposite side of the altar, her face illuminated by the lamp she held. "Your order has kept this knowledge safe until it could be used for its intended purpose. I believe that time has come." "And if you're wrong?" Oswin asked. "If this leads not to preservation but to destruction?" "Then at least we acted according to our conscience," she replied. "Is that not what your faith teaches?" "That we must follow the truth as we understand it." "The truth?" For so long, Oswin had believed the truth was simple, that duty meant adherence to the rules set before him. But in the past weeks, he had begun to see that truth could be more complex, more nuanced than the rigid framework he had built his life around. He opened the book. The pages contained diagrams and text in a script Oswin had never seen before. It appeared to be a language constructed specifically for the ritual, its symbols bearing no relationship to any known alphabet. "This will take time to decipher," he said, frowning at the unfamiliar characters. "Perhaps not," Sybilla replied. She reached into the pouch at her waist and withdrew a small object wrapped in silk. "My father left me this. He said it would be meaningless until I found the ritual text." She unwrapped the object, revealing a small silver disc etched with symbols matching those in the book. Around its edge were 7 notches of varying depths. "A decoder," Oswin breathed, reaching for it. Their fingers brushed as he took the disc, sending an unexpected warmth up his arm. "With this and the text, we can decipher the location." For 3 days, they worked without rest, aligning the disc with different pages of the text, transcribing the results, searching for patterns in the seemingly random sequences of letters that emerged. On the 4th day, Oswin noticed something. "The 7 virtues," he said, looking up from the parchment where they had been recording their results. "Each decoded sequence contains 7 words. If we arrange them according to the virtues..." Sybilla's eyes widened. "The first word under each virtue forms a sentence." They worked feverishly, rearranging their notes according to this new insight. When they finished, 7 sentences lay before them, cryptic, but unmistakably a set of directions. "Beneath the shadow where olive trees grow, 3 stones mark the path not taken," Oswin read aloud. "Follow the water that flows underground to the chamber of echoing silence." "It's a location," Sybilla said, excitement coloring her voice. "Somewhere in the Mediterranean, judging by the reference to olive trees." "Cyprus," Oswin said suddenly. "The 3rd sentence mentions the sanctuary of Aphrodite. That would place it near Paphos." Their eyes met across the table, the realization of what they had discovered binding them together in a moment of shared wonder. "We've found it," Sybilla whispered. "Or at least, the path to finding it." In that moment, Oswin felt something shift within him, a crack in the foundation of his belief that duty meant denying himself any connection beyond his service to the order. For the first time, he allowed himself to see Sybilla not as a disruption or even as a fellow seeker, but as someone who had awakened something in him he had long thought dormant. But the moment was shattered by the sound of footsteps in the passageway outside, heavy, purposeful strides that belonged to neither brother nor scholar. "Someone's coming," Oswin hissed, gathering their notes. "No one should know we're here." The door to the chamber burst open, revealing 3 men in the livery of the Cardinal's personal guard, swords drawn. Behind them stood Brother Thomas, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. "Brother Oswin," the lead guard announced, "by order of Cardinal Beaufort, you are to surrender all documents pertaining to the Enigmatic Ritual and accompany us to London for questioning." Oswin stepped in front of Sybilla, shielding her with his body. "On what charges?" "Heresy," the guard replied coldly. "And conspiracy against the Church." Brother Thomas stepped forward, his voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, Oswin. They threatened to disband the monastery." The abbot had no choice. Understanding crashed over Oswin like a wave. The cardinal had never intended for Sybilla to find anything of value. He had used her to identify which texts contained the secret he sought, expecting the order's strict adherence to duty would prevent any meaningful discovery. "Lady Grantham acts with the cardinal's own permission," Oswin said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Lady Grantham will also accompany us," the guard replied. "Her father's association with known heretics has placed her loyalty in question." As the guards advanced, Oswin made a decision that would forever change the course of his life. His duty was not to the cardinal, nor even to the order as he had understood it, but to the truth the order had been founded to protect. With a swift movement, he grabbed the lamp from the altar and hurled it at the lead guard. Oil splashed across the man's chest, flames erupting instantly. In the chaos that followed, Oswin seized Sybilla's hand. "This way," he shouted, pulling her toward the smallest of the 7 alcoves. He pressed the Statue of Hope, and the back wall swung inward, revealing a narrow tunnel beyond. "How did you know?" Sybilla gasped as they fled into the darkness. "I didn't," Oswin admitted. "But hope seemed our best option." The tunnel led them through the foundations of the monastery to a small, concealed door that opened into the woods beyond the eastern wall. Behind them, they could hear shouts and the faint glow of torches as the alarm spread through the monastery. "We can't go back," Oswin said, the reality of his actions settling over him. "I've broken my vows, betrayed my order." "You fulfilled your order's true purpose," Sybilla countered, her eyes fierce in the moonlight. "The knowledge was protected until it could be used." They traveled through the night, keeping to the forest paths where the cardinal's men would not easily follow. By dawn, they had reached a small fishing village where Sybilla revealed another surprise. Her father had established a network of loyal allies prepared to help in this very circumstance. He knew the danger was real, she explained as they boarded a small merchant vessel bound for the continent. He prepared for every contingency. As the English coast receded behind them, Oswin stood at the rail, watching the land of his birth fade into the mist. Everything he had believed about himself and his place in the world had been transformed. The rigid certainty that had guided his life, that duty must supersede all personal desire, had given way to a more complex understanding. "Do you regret it?" Sybilla asked, joining him at the rail. "Leaving everything behind?" Oswin considered the question carefully. "I regret that I must appear a traitor to those who trusted me. But I do not regret following the truth, even at such cost." "And what of your vows? Your dedication to a life without worldly attachment?" He turned to face her, allowing himself for the first time to fully acknowledge what had been growing between them. "I've come to believe that true duty may sometimes require us to form attachments, not avoid them." The founders of the ritual were 7 friends bound by a common purpose. They understood that some burdens cannot be carried alone. Sybilla's hand found his on the rail, her fingers warm against his skin. Then we will carry this burden together, wherever it leads us. Cyprus welcomed them with golden light and the scent of cypress trees. Following the clues deciphered from the ritual text, they journeyed inland from Paphos, toward the foothills where ancient olive groves cast long shadows across the landscape. Their search led them to a secluded valley where 3 standing stones, weathered by centuries of sun and rain, formed a triangle pointing toward a cliff face overgrown with vines. Behind the vegetation, they discovered the entrance to a cave system that wound deep into the earth, following an underground stream just as the ritual had described. The chamber of echoing silence lay at the heart of the cave network, a vast, domed cavern where sound seemed to both amplify and disappear. And there, protected from time itself by the perfect conditions of the cave, stood the lost library. Not every text had been saved. The collection represented perhaps a tenth of what had once been housed in Alexandria, but what remained was beyond price. Scrolls and codices containing knowledge thought lost forever, medical treatises, astronomical calculations, philosophical discourses, and histories of civilizations long forgotten. "It's more than I dared hope for," Sybilla whispered, her voice breaking with emotion as they surveyed the chamber. "My father died believing this existed, but never knowing if it would be found." The 7 founders created the ritual to ensure this knowledge would survive, Oswin said, carefully unrolling a scroll. They understood that it might take generations before it could safely emerge into the world again. "And now we must decide what to do with it," Sybilla replied. "The cardinal will not stop searching. If he discovers this place—" Oswin nodded grimly. "Then we must do as the founders did, preserve the knowledge until the world is ready to receive it." Over the following months, they established themselves in a small village near Paphos. With funds from Sybilla's inheritance, they purchased an unassuming property with cellars deep enough to safely store the most precious texts they had retrieved from the cave. To the villagers, they were simply a scholar and his wife who had come to Cyprus for its climate and seclusion. The transformation of their relationship from reluctant allies to partners in both purpose and heart had happened gradually, then suddenly. On a warm evening beneath a sky brilliant with stars, Oswin had finally given voice to what had grown between them. "I was taught that duty meant denying oneself any attachment that might compete with devotion to God," he had told her as they sat among the olive trees. "But I've come to believe that love itself can be an expression of duty, to truth, to knowledge, to the best parts of human nature." "And what of your vow of celibacy?" Sybilla had asked, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "I have broken many vows," he admitted. "But perhaps in doing so, I have found a true path to serving what is right and good in this world." They were married in the Greek fashion, in a small stone church overlooking the sea. No cardinal or abbot blessed their union, but in the simplicity of their vows, they found a sacredness that needed no official sanction. Together, they established a scriptorium where they began the painstaking work of copying the most vulnerable texts, creating duplicates that could be dispersed to trusted scholars throughout Europe. They developed their own cipher, based on but distinct from the Enigmatic Ritual, to protect the knowledge during transmission. Word of their work spread cautiously through channels established by Lord Grantham before his death. Scholars seeking genuine knowledge rather than power began to make the journey to Cyprus, where Oswin and Sybilla would evaluate their intentions before revealing anything of significance. 5 years after their flight from England, as they worked side by side in their scriptorium, a messenger arrived with news from home. Cardinal Beaufort had died, and the new regime showed less interest in pursuing old vendettas. The monastery of St. Clement had survived, though much diminished in status. "We could return if we wished," Sybilla said that evening as they walked along the shoreline. "Your name might be cleared with the proper influence." Oswin watched the waves breaking against the sand, considering the path that had brought him here. The rigid young monk who had believed duty meant denial of all personal desire seemed a stranger to him now. "England is no longer my home," he said finally. My place is here, with you, continuing the work we've begun." In the years that followed, their small scriptorium grew into a center of learning, modest in appearance but profound in its impact. Scholars who studied there carried knowledge back to universities and courts throughout Europe, quietly fueling what would later be called the Renaissance. And if visitors noticed the 7 alcoves in the main chamber of the scriptorium, each containing a small statue representing a virtue, few understood their significance. Fewer still recognized that the couple who had created this haven of knowledge had performed their own version of the enigmatic ritual, not to speak with the dead, but to give new life to wisdom long thought lost. On warm evenings, Oswin Kerrick and Sybilla Grantham would sit in their garden overlooking the Mediterranean, watching the sun sink into the sea in a blaze of gold and crimson. In those quiet moments, Oswin would sometimes reflect on the young monk who had believed his highest calling was to guard knowledge without ever truly engaging with it. "I once thought duty meant sacrifice," he told Sybilla on their 20th anniversary as they shared wine beneath a trellis heavy with night-blooming jasmine. "That to serve truth, I must deny myself love." She took his hand, her fingers tracing the ink stains that marked them both as scribes and scholars. "And now? Now I understand that the greatest service to truth comes through love, through connection, not isolation." He smiled, watching the last light fade from the sky. The enigmatic ritual wasn't about hiding knowledge from the world, but about preserving it until those who loved wisdom enough to protect it could bring it back into the light. Sybilla leaned against his shoulder, her silver-streaked hair catching the glow of the rising moon. "Then we have fulfilled our duty, have we not?" "Yes," Oswin replied, his heart full with the certainty that had replaced his youthful rigidity. "Though not in the way I once imagined duty should be fulfilled." Above them, stars emerged one by one, the same stars that had guided sailors and scholars for thousands of years. And beneath those eternal lights, 2 people who had once been bound by false beliefs about duty and station found contentment in the knowledge that sometimes the truest form of devotion is not to lock wisdom away, but to share it, and to love those with whom we share our most sacred truths.